Hi, so I wanted to create a quick video about errors because I see a lot of people ignoring errors and I think they're pretty useful and that you should actually use them more and more because that's going to help you debug and actually understand your code better. So I wanted to start with an example. So this is basically a third-person template and let's open up ABP Many. For example, one thing here is, let's say this class is crucial. If the animations are not working for the character, we want to know about it and we want to fix it. And if this is happening in a released game, we maybe want to have some recovery or something so we get animations back on the character, so our player actually has the animations. But if you look in here, what we have is this cast 2 and cast fail leads to nothing. So every time you have something like this, think about, is this cast crucial? And if it fails, do I care about it? And most of the time, the answer is going to be yes. So when something like this happens, you want some way to know about it. Usually what I would do for something like this is, let's type print. So I would do a print, and I wouldn't do a normal print. What you can do in here when you are setting up a string is you can type error or you can type warning, and that way what you can do is get different colored logs for later when you want to debug. So for example, what we can do is error and let's say something like this. So player controller cast failed. Let's give ourselves a little bit more space here. Next thing I like to do is I usually put some colors in here. So red maybe, and you can also add it just for ease of use later. We can name it error, do that. Let's say 10 seconds. And you can do here maybe cast fail. Why you want to have something in the key is that you don't get the spam. Usually one is enough to let you know that something is wrong, and then later you can look at the logs and stuff like that. And next what I like to do is add a stack trace, and stack trace is basically gonna give me a path in the log. Where is this error trigger, or where is this stack trace basically? So for example, if this cast failed error was triggered, it would be printed in here. So let me just clear the log. I'm just gonna trigger it directly just so we can get it here. Let's press play and we got the error, and you can see in here that you get this call stack, and you can see basically it's not going to be too precise, but it's going to tell you, okay, this is in animation blueprint. And also in here you can see how we have the red text, and if you did warning, so as you can see, yeah, it fails with yellow. Depending how crucial the failure is, you can select if you want the warning or if you want the error. I usually go with the error just because usually I want to fix it, but depending on, maybe this is like a projectile or something that came from a gun, and if something is not working properly, maybe you can kind of leave it. It's not too big of a deal, but if something is crucial, if something basically breaks, you always need to think about is if this cast fails or if this check fails. There is also multiple types of checks. So you have like the validation. If we go in here, so we have this is valid. So if this fails, so always think about if something fails, is it crucial? So do I want the game to basically stop or kick the player or something to fix it? Or maybe just for like a developer thing while you're working, do you want to know when something fails? And 95% of the time, the answer is going to be yes, basically. So this is one thing where I noticed that people actually use these validation checks to actually avoid errors. So they use this because they got an error, and then they use this to just go through is valid, and then they can kind of ignore the error. But that's the opposite way you want to go, because then you are going to get confused because something is not going to work and there's going to be no prints, no logs, nothing, and it's going to take you like 5 hours to debug instead of 10 minutes or something like that. Don't ignore the errors. Errors are pretty important basically. Also we have one in here, so if this fails, now since this is already in here, so when this fails, we maybe want to deal with it, but maybe we want like a special case in here. But this one might not need to be crucial. This might be something that gives you a warning or something, but this one is a bit more crucial because this is where it's actually set. Okay, so that's one thing that I noticed. Let me move this from here. So we have similar thing in here. If we don't get input for the character, we probably want to do something. We don't want to just like go into the game and the character is standing, he cannot move it, and that's about it. So we want to do something. And this right now, how it's set up, it basically just avoids errors. So if cast fails, it goes nowhere. If this is not valid, it goes nowhere. So it's actually not a good way to deal with errors here. So just to kind of show you an example here, I have this is server. Let's say, for example, you want to do something on the server. You're creating a multiplayer game and you want to trigger some stuff on the server, and you accidentally put this logic to be played on the server. So I'm going to do branch here. And if this event is triggered on the server, I'm going to put through here. Let me just move this. I think we are on the client right now. Yeah, let's do standalone. So if I press play now, we can see that everything works fine. And let's say you tested your game in the standalone, and then later you're testing your game in the client and you press play. And I'm pressing buttons right on my keyboard and nothing is happening. This might get very confusing, you're not sure what's happening, why does your character do not have inputs, and if you looked at the log there'll be nothing because you're basically avoiding the errors. So if you go back here, what we can do in here is, let me see if I have this, so I copy pasted our print. So there is multiple things that we can do. So first we can do in here, so we have the player controller cast failed, we can also do something like this, or yeah, let's do something like this. And let's not do warning, I'm gonna do error. Just something like that. Let's compile, save, now let's press play. And now we get the error, so server says that player controller cast failed. So now if I close this, go in here, we get our stack trace, so we can trace basically where the stuff is happening. So you can see third person character, begin play, and the second one, I'm not sure if it gives us anything useful. Seems like nothing useful there. So we kind of know that it is in the begin play of our third person character. And then you would basically go here and find here. This way, now we get the idea that something crashed and we actually resolve this because it's important for this character. And for the last example, I wanted to use something like this spawn actor. So this might be something that you dealt with at some point, but let's say you want to spawn the character and then you go from here and then you do some actions on the character, you call some function or something, and you create your logic, you press play, and there is an error happening saying like this character doesn't exist or something vague is happening basically. So what you could do in here is use the valid option and do all the print stuff in here at is not valid. That way you can quickly catch this and also realize then after you debug that maybe this was set to try adjust location, don't spawn if still colliding, meaning that this actor actually does not necessarily spawn, it will try to spawn, and because of that you might get an error and then you have to deal with the option if it is not spawning. So there is like tricky ways that you can have failable conditions and you basically need to think about them and try to take care of them. Also, you don't just have to use these is valid or casts to catch a failure. You can also use branches. So if something is happening, you can check, let's say, okay, I'm changing the state, I'm doing something, and after all of that, my state of the character needs to be, I don't know, idle. Well, at the end of all of your logic, you can set maybe a branch and then you can check the state. And if the state is idle, everything is fine. If it's not idle, you can give yourself print an error or log something, use stack traces, whatever. Just let yourself know that there was an error and something is not happening how you want it to happen, basically. Yeah, so that's about it about errors. Try not to ignore them, do the opposite, try to catch them wherever they are. Later you're gonna thank yourself because while you're playing the game, if something that you don't want happens, you're gonna get an error, you're gonna get a print, you're gonna see where that happened, and you're gonna be way more confident in your code because the random stuff is not gonna happen in your game as often because you are catching all of the ways that your code can fail, basically, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's about it. Hopefully it helps you.